Hey Mike, what have you been up to?
Oh, hey. I still can't wrap my head around how it's already summer. It feels like yesterday was January 1st, and now I'm already thinking about what to buy for Christmas. This year just disappeared, and honestly, I can barely remember what I spent most of it doing.
And that's exactly where we're going to start. Because that feeling isn't random, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's a well-documented psychological effect with a very real explanation. And once you understand how it works, you can stop feeling like you're trapped by it. Let's begin with the simplest explanation, the mathematical one. When you were 5 years old, a single year made up 20% of your entire life. One full year was 1/5 of everything you had ever experienced. Now picture yourself at 35. 1 year is now less than 3% of your life, a tiny, almost insignificant fraction. Psychologists often refer to this idea as the proportional theory of time. Your brain doesn't measure time like a stopwatch counting seconds. Instead, it judges time relative to how much of your life you've already lived. When you're 5, a year is an enormous chunk of your existence. When you're 35, it's just a small piece of a much larger picture. The clock ticks at exactly the same speed today as it did back then. What's changed is your perception of it. That explains why the years seem to fly by as we get older. But it doesn't explain something else. Why does a 2-week vacation at the beach disappear in the blink of an eye, while a boring Monday morning meeting feels like it lasts forever? That's where a second mechanism comes in, and this one has nothing to do with math. It has to do with how your brain physically stores memories. Imagine your brain as a camera that doesn't record at a constant frame rate. Instead, it speeds up and slows down depending on how new your experiences are. You arrive in a city you've never visited before. You try a restaurant you've never been to. You meet someone new. Your brain switches into high-resolution recording mode. It captures far more detail because novelty sends an important signal. This might matter later, better remember it. Now think about your usual commute to work. The same highway, the same turn, the same gas station every morning. Your brain switches to autopilot. There's no reason to record every second in detail. You've seen it hundreds of times before, and nothing unexpected is likely to happen. So, it compresses the entire experience into a single blurry memory. Drove to work, same as always.
So while it's happening, I don't even notice that's what's going on. But later, when I try to remember a month where nothing new happened, it feels like that month barely existed.
Exactly. Now compare that to a real trip, a weekend getaway, a beach vacation, or a long road trip across the country to visit family. While you're there, you're surrounded by new streets, unfamiliar smells, different conversations over dinner. Those days can actually feel longer because your brain is recording everything in much greater detail. But here's the interesting part. When you think back on that trip a month later, it feels enormous, much bigger than an ordinary week at home, even though both lasted exactly 7 days. That's because there are actually 2 different ways we experience time. Psychologists distinguish between prospective time, how long an experience feels while it's happening, and retrospective time, how long it seems when you look back on it later. Childhood is almost entirely built on this retrospective stretching of time. Every summer was filled with firsts. The first time you rode a bike without training wheels, your first day at a new school, your first crush, your first solo road trip. Your brain stored all of those moments in incredible detail. And that's why, looking back today, those childhood years feel so vast. As adults, those first times gradually disappear. You start a new job, and 6 months later it's just another routine. You learn the way home, and eventually you could drive it without thinking. Even your relationships, your hobbies, and the neighborhood you live in slowly become part of the background. And your brain doesn't waste storage space on familiar background. It simply flips past it like a book you've already read 10 times and practically know by heart.
That sounds a little depressing, honestly. So the older you get, the less of your own life actually stays with you?
Only if you spend your life on autopilot and never change anything. This isn't a biological sentence. It's a side effect of routine. And once you understand the mechanism behind it, you can actually push back against it. The key is to deliberately introduce novelty into even the most ordinary week. You don't have to fly to another continent. Small changes are enough. Take a different route to work. Try a restaurant you've never been to. Pick up a new hobby in the evenings. Have a real conversation with someone you've never met before at the gym. Even small first-time experiences are enough to switch your brain back into high-resolution recording mode. Each one becomes an anchor that makes that period of your life feel richer and longer when you look back on it later.
So the more little firsts I collect throughout the year, the longer that year will feel when I remember it.
Exactly. And that's consistent with what researchers have observed in people with different lifestyles. People who regularly explore new places, learn new skills, and meet new people tend to remember those periods of their lives as much fuller and longer, even though, according to the calendar, they had exactly the same number of days as everyone else. There's a third factor too, and this one isn't about novelty, it's about attention. When your attention is scattered, scrolling through one short video after another, half watching something while checking your phone, your brain has almost nothing to hold on to. Each video lasts only a few seconds. None of them is memorable on its own. So 40 minutes collapse into one blurry stretch with no meaningful landmarks. And without those landmarks, your brain has no real sense of how much time actually passed.
So the more distracted I am, the faster that time simply disappears without leaving much behind.
Exactly. And it works both while you're living through it and later when you try to figure out where your entire evening went. There's another interesting side effect of the same process. It's the way we use recurring events to mark the passage of time. Summer vacation, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. As a child, every one of those seasons felt like a major event because it came packed with new experiences, new costumes, new presents, new adventures. As adults, those same holidays often follow almost exactly the same script every year. The same food on the table, the same conversations with relatives, the same gift shopping. Naturally, your brain stops treating them as separate, memorable milestones. Instead, they blend together into one repeating block. That's why it suddenly feels like, wait, it's almost Christmas again. Not because time is speeding up, but because nothing between those holidays stood out enough for your brain to record in detail. Multitasking only makes the problem worse. When your attention is constantly split between work, bills, household chores, and an endless mental checklist of everything else you still need to do, your brain has far fewer resources available to fully capture the present moment. A child playing outside with friends isn't worrying about tomorrow's meeting or next month's bills. Their attention is completely immersed in the experience. The entire moment gets recorded. Adults, on the other hand, almost always divide their attention between what's happening right now and a dozen background concerns. And the less attention you give to the present moment, the thinner and shorter that memory becomes. So what can you actually do about it? No, you can't go back to experiencing time the way you did when you were 5 years old. But there are 3 practical things that genuinely help. First, intentionally add novelty to your week. You don't need to reinvent your entire life. Just aim for one new experience every week. Take a different route home. Order a dish you've never tried before. Second, practice giving your full attention to the present moment. When you consciously notice the taste of your morning coffee, a meaningful conversation with someone you care about, or the scenery outside the car window during a long drive, instead of running on autopilot, your brain starts recording those moments in much greater detail again. Third, cut back on mindless scrolling. It's one of the biggest creators of those empty gaps in time that become almost impossible to remember later, no matter how hard you try.
So, if we keep it simple, time itself isn't actually speeding up. It's our perception that changes because we grow older and life becomes much more predictable.
Exactly. The clock moves at exactly the same speed it always has, whether you're 5 years old or 50. The only thing that changes is how much new experience your brain manages to pack into that stretch of time. And that's the one variable in this entire equation that you can actually influence starting today.
So if I want next year to feel like I actually lived it, instead of watching it fly past,
stop living it on autopilot. Every new experience, every small detour from your usual routine is another page your brain adds to the story of that year. And when you look back 12 months from now, those pages will determine how that year feels. Whether it was long, full, and genuinely lived, or whether it simply slipped through your fingers while you were busy thinking about something else.